preparing to take a photograph. Tim Toller, one of the students, is laughing uncontrollably, causing the image to blur. The photographer tells him to stop laughing, but when the principal comes, his mustache motions are so amusing that the young boy can't stop laughing. With his chuckle, he causes other students to laugh as well, hence ruining the entire picture. Tim, who lost his mother when he was a child, has only his father to lean on. His father earns a living by working for a construction firm. Tim constantly has a bright smile on his face, despite the fact that their lives are not simple. Ida, the daughter of a bakery owner, is his best friend. They both like going to see comedy movies together on a regular basis. Ida has had a limb impairment since she was a child. However, Tim's smile and his companionship motivate her to be happy in her life. Despite the fact that they are not wealthy, Tim's father strives to meet all of Tim's demands. The two are inseparably linked. They routinely attend horse racing events since they both like watching the races and placing bets on the horses. After losing one of the bets, the two return home, passing the Grand Hotel on their way. Tim's father reveals that he used to be the hotel's boss and pledges to treat him to a great lunch there one day. One day, Tim's father brings home a stepmother and her 14-year-old son, Erwin. After getting a full family, his father hopes that Tim will live a happy life from now on. However, things quickly turn bad for Tim. Erwin insults Tim and destroys his late mother's present. Following their altercation, the stepmother defends her son, requesting that Tim apologizes to him. The next morning, Ida inquires about the bruise on Tim's face, but he dismisses it by telling her he knocked into a cupboard. Later, they go to see a movie. Every humorous part in the movie makes Tim burst out laughing inside the theater. When everyone else in the audience sees him laugh, they start laughing as well. The next day, Tim and his father are seen together watching another horse race, which they win. After collecting their winning amount, his father bumps into a man wearing black sunglasses and scolds him to watch his step. Tim appears to be enjoying himself in the company of his father, oblivious to the fact that this is his last encounter with him. In the next scene, the funeral of Tim's father, who died while working on the building site, is portrayed. His stepmother displays little emotion and does not even purchase a suitable tombstone for him. Tim flees in tears after being humiliated by his stepmother. He arrives at the racetrack to think about his father and, to his surprise, discovers a 5-cent coin. Just then, the same unknown guy that his father had previously scolded arrives in front of him and informs him that he is one of his father's friends. He offers Tim a pre-filled slot and invites him to bet on Westwind, his favorite horse. Westwind unexpectedly wins the race, and Tim profits handsomely from his bet. Tim sobs as he collects the money and chooses to purchase a suitable tombstone for his father. However, two fraudsters quickly round him and grab his money with a simple magic trick. Tim only discovers what has happened to his money once Baron Lufette, the same guy who claimed to be his father's friend, shows him the printouts from his pocket instead of money. He lends him another 5 nickels and asks him to meet him at the racetrack tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. The next morning, when Tim is about to leave his house, his stepmother requests him to bring her some cakes. He runs to Ida's bakery, where he is reminded of his debt by the bakery owner. Tim responds jokingly that he would repay her by robbing the senator. He arrives at the race course after some time and waits for Baron. There, he falls asleep on the bench because he is tired of waiting. When Tim is sleeping, the same two scammers seize his only coin. When Baron shows up, Tim has no money left for the bet, so he tries to buy his laughter by offering him a contract in which he will assist him in winning every bet he places. Tim is unaware of the contract's implications and signs it without hesitation. The grin on his face fades away as soon as he signs the deal, indicating that Tim's smile has been sold to Baron. At the workplace, Baron enters with a chuckle, surprising his coworkers. The two scammers are actually his workers, who are transformed into mice in order to keep an eye on Tim. Tim settles the bakery's debt and also takes Ida to see a movie after winning the first bet. Tim does not laugh while watching the movie, despite the fact that the sequences are highly amusing. When Ida asks about the money after the movie, he says he robbed the senator with a serious face. Seeing his serious face, Ida trusts his statements and flees the scene. Later, as Ida is telling her mother about Tim's story, one of the women at the bakery overhears it. The nosy woman is seen telling all of her neighbors about Tim's story. By night, everyone in the community is aware of the story thanks to word of mouth. During its distribution, the story is even changed. The story is modified to the extent that Senator Stassen was viciously assaulted and robbed by Tim. When he gets home, Erwin discovers the money in his pockets and his stepmother accuses him of disgracing her name. But when Ida's mom arrives at his home and informs his stepmother that no senator has been robbed, Tim realizes that Ida is the one who had spread the rumor. He also confirms that he won the money from the racetrack bet and that he also has the receipts. Afterward, Tim wants to play and bet some marbles with his buddies, but none of them want to because he always wins and takes all of their money. Later, his stepmother brings him and Erwin to the racetrack to see if his prediction is successful. Despite winning the first two bets, they become greedy and place a third bet with their entire money. Tim chooses to bet on Halali, an underdog horse, but Halali finishes fourth in the race. Tim's stepmother becomes enraged and begins berating him for his forecast. Surprisingly, the announcer declares that the first of the three horses have been disqualified and that Halali is the true winner of the race. His stepmother jumps with pleasure and goes to collect her winnings, while Tim wanders outside the Grand Hotel. Outside the hotel, Tim meets Kreshmir, an elderly hotel employee. He's also the person Tim met before betting on Halali for the third time. He inquires about Tim's betting abilities, but Tim is not in the mood to answer. Tim instead asks whether he may work while staying at the hotel. Kreshmir declines his plea, telling him to return to his stepmother and make up with her. Hearing this, the confident Tim makes a bet with him, predicting that he will be hired at the hotel. Meanwhile, Ivan, the hotel manager, rushes up to Kreshmir and requests that he get an elevator boy. Tim is quickly recommended for the position by Kreshmir, and he also gets to reside at the hotel. The next day, Tim comes back home just to compose a goodbye letter to his stepmother. On his way back to the hotel, he runs across Ida, who considers but does not question him about the cake she baked for him. Tim also wants to tell Ida about his racetrack wins and his new job, as well as question her about the betrayal. But the two walk away without saying anything to one another. Ida arrives at her house, wailing and sobbing. She is taken aback when she discovers Baron inside her house with her mother unconscious. Baron attempts to persuade Ida by saying that Tim wants to play with her, but he is hesitant due to her malformed legs. He then makes a proposal to Ida. Meanwhile, Tim pays a visit to the tombstone sculptor and begs him to bet with him since his father's grave has a statue. The sculptor is likewise certain that there is a statue. Tim obtains everything he requires for his father and now desires the return of his laughter. He returns to the racetrack in the hopes of tracking down Baron. However, Tim is not permitted to visit the racetrack since he has made a large profit on the bet. Tim arrives at the hotel saddened to discover that the cleaning lady has discovered 2 mice and is preparing to kill them. Tim takes over the job of finishing the mice, but instead of doing so, he lets them go. Tim's efforts move the two, and they are transported back to Baron's office. They're also chastised for not having heard anything about Tim. Tim sits alone, desperate to regain his laughter, and reads the contract where he discovers that if he loses any bet, he will regain his laughter. After that, he encounters Kreshmir, who informs him about Ivan, his love interest. Determined to get his laughter back, Tim bets with Kreshmir that Baron will show up at their hotel the next day. The next morning, Baron arrives at the Grand Hotel. But when Tim asks him to return his laughter, he refuses to do so. Baron then takes off his spectacles and reveals his eyes to Tim, which he finds familiar. Later, Tim bets with Kreshmir that the cakes will be supplied by Ida's bakery, Beber. Meanwhile, a chef approaches Tim and requests that he deliver cakes from one of the greatest bakeries he can locate. Tim runs to the bakery and comes face to face with Ida, who has Baron's eyes. He then convinces Ida to let him bet that Baron will have to return her eyes to her. Ida reluctantly accepts, and with a blink, she regains her eyes. Elsewhere, once his eyes are switched, Baron, who is making a speech, is bothered by his vision. He puts on his dark spectacles and drives away from the hotel right away. When Tim returns to the hotel, Kreshmir begins to believe in his abilities and offers him a wager to make Yvonne fall in love with him. In the meantime, Yvonne approaches them and Kreshmir changes his mind. Tim then reveals to Kreshmir that he had in fact signed a contract with Baron to win every bet he places in exchange for his laughter. Hearing his story, Kreshmir decides to assist Tim in regaining his laughter and overthrowing Baron. He then challenges Tim to a bet on whether he would be the world's richest man. Suddenly, a group of strangers arrive at the hotel and whisk Tim away, claiming that he is the only heir of the world's richest man, who recently committed suicide. Tim is then escorted to the richest man's mansion, where he meets Baron, the twin of the dead richest man. After Tim's request, Baron returns his laughter to him, but just for a few minutes so that the press may photograph him. He then claims the laughter back, saying that the contract is still valid. Baron continues to explain to him about his wicked business, claiming that he is in charge of all bad deeds across the world. We also learn that any time Tim wins the bet, a piece of his soul is lost. In the next scene, after knowing about Tim's fortune, his stepmother along with Erwin approaches him at Baron's mansion asking for a loan. By this time, Tim has gotten cold by his heart and also lost some parts of his soul. He gets angry at his stepmother and throws them out of the mansion. Tim then wants to see his friend Ida, but Baron tells him that his new life would be harmful to Ida and the old Kreshmir, so Tim must never see them again. As a present, Baron tries to persuade Tim to help him administer a city. After reading news from a newspaper about a charity racing cup to Tim's name, Ida is concerned about Tim. She visits the Baron's mansion, where she meets Tim. Upon seeing her, Tim advises Ida that she should stop looking for him since they no longer belong in the same environment. Hearing this, Ida becomes devastated. Later, while Tim and Baron are watching movies together, we discover through the two messengers that Tim's father was murdered by Baron. They feel sorry for Tim and wish to revolt against Baron. After the posters of the Tim Thaler Cup are pasted all over the city, Ida visits Uncle Kreshmir at the Grand Hotel, noticing something odd about Tim's smile on the poster. Uncle Kreshmir then tells Ida about Tim and Baron's deal, and the two decide to assist Tim to recover his laughter. The following Sunday, Baron takes Tim to a racing cup, and Ida and Uncle Kreshmir follow them. When Kreshmir is helping Ida climb on the stage to meet Tim, they are captured by the two scammers who were saved by Tim. However, they decide to help Tim when they get to know that Ida is his friend. Lying to Baron, they bring Tim downstairs to Ida and Uncle Kreshmir, where Ida proposes Tim make a bet with her that he cannot laugh. Tim, unexpectedly, declines to bet, telling them that he does not need laughter anymore. Meanwhile, Baron senses something fishy is going around and starts looking for Tim. Ida and Kreshmir still cannot persuade Tim to bet. Just then, Ida delivers a worm joke and Tim finally gets free from the shackles of his lost soul. He is also able to recall Ida's worm joke. He takes off his spectacles and finally recognizes her. She then holds out her hand and asks him to bet that he will not laugh. At the same time, Baron approaches them and extends his hand to Tim, inviting him to accompany him home. Tim chooses Ida's bet, implying that laughter and friendship triumph over wealth and power. Finally, Tim is able to laugh again. As they emerge from the downstage area, they discover Baron as a frail man outdoors. Before he departs, he reverts his two messengers who betrayed him to mice. Tim assures them that he will care about them, and the movie ends. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to recap your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.